Hey, we're live. What's going on, guys?
Hanging out, making mischief. What's going on with you, man? Long time no talk.
Good. Yeah, it's been a while. This is our very first official conversation, which is exciting. So we're going to be talking AWS DevOps type stuff. Andrew Howden, engineer at SiteWords, Magento Enterprise Solutions partner. And you do a lot of in-house DevOps stuff for your clients. And then Winston Nolan in the right box, at least for me, works for a very large flash sale merchant out in South Africa. And in a chat room that I may frequent with some of the smartest people that I know in the Magento community, he's like the DevOps god. So,
Hi, you guys. Kalen, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. This is fun. Been wanting to do this for a little while. So I don't know where to start. I mean, it might be interesting. I mean, I'm gonna basically just, you guys are gonna be talking most of the time. I'm gonna try not to look too stupid is basically my goal. This whole thing. Try not to say too many stupid things all at one time. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It might be interesting, Winston, for you to talk a little bit about some of your infrastructure. It'll be cool to get kind of the different perspectives between merchant side and agency side, and things like that. So Winston, to take it away, man. Tell us a little bit about, also a little bit about your background and how you got into this racket and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, all right. So I'm Winston Nolan. I am an operator in the IRC Magento channel. I started with Magento way back in 2007, I believe, 0.71 beta. And,
Good Lord, that was early.
Back then there was only, what was it called? OS Commerce. And so I've got an identical twin brother, and me and my brother, we built a CD shop, and we were selling hoodies and clothing and MP3 and WAV files over the internet.
I didn't even know that. I didn't even realize all this. This is fantastic.
Yeah. And I had a day job back then as a systems administrator. And so in the evenings, I would pack all my orders, take all the hoodies and the T-shirts and all that kind of stuff, pack them nicely. And then in the morning, I'd take a break from work at about 10 o'clock, and I'd go and ship this stuff via the National Postal Service. And it was crazy, man, because the stuff would just never arrive. And then the guys would complain, and then 2 days after you ship another parcel, the original parcel would arrive. So there were some complexities there. But, Magento was just, from the get-go, it had such a good feel to it. It was sufficiently complex. It could give you a lot of features. And I've carried on along that vein. I started building bigger and bigger e-commerce sites. Started doing freelancing, and then I got snapped up by Media24, which is a big media house in South Africa. And for them, I built quite a few stores. And then, this is how I've traveled. My interest, I would say this DevOps thing comes from when I joined Runway Sale about 4 years ago. This is the company that I work for in the day. I'm the head of tech there, and back when I started, I was the only developer, the only permanent developer, and we just inherited the site from an agency.
Was it SiteWords?
And so we. I wish it was.
By the way, can you say anything about the sort of the scale of Runway Sale, just so people have an idea of the levels of badassery that you work in?
Yes. So on our busy days, we go from about 500 active concurrents to 5,000 active concurrents in 5 minutes. And then we go from 5,000 active concurrents to 10,000 active concurrents in another 5 minutes. So our site goes from 500 to 10,000. We do quite a few orders on these days. And so we had to just scale Magento, make sure that our infrastructure can scale. And this is really where the beauty of AWS is what we host on, came through. And I suppose each company does things differently. We don't have a permanent in-house DevOps person. We only have a DevOps person for a couple of hours a month. So our whole infrastructure was built around the notion of infrastructure as code, configuration in code, and scaling this thing as fast and as high as we can. So for example, our staging can go to equal to production or times 10 production in about half an hour. This is if I have to scale it manually. Typically, before we have these very busy days like Black Friday, we'll scale, a couple of days before, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's, I guess, it in a nutshell.
That's intense. That's intense. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were in the middle of giving your whole spiel, and I was curious to get some rough numbers on the scale of runway sale, but.
No, not at all. It's a beautiful journey, man. I love this. I love e-commerce on cloud systems, and I love this whole automation vibe. And through that, by having limited resources available, we've learned how to do things a bit smarter and all that kind of stuff.
Nice.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
And Andrew, a little bit about your background and what you do, what keeps you busy.
Too much. So my background, basically I started, I used to own a small company, but that was quite some years ago. And as part of that small company, we did a couple of different things. We ran training people, fitness training people. We had like a little shop that sold fitness gear. So basically, I got into Magento because it ran on cPanel and didn't break every 10 seconds. And that's kind of my entry into this market. So that was a bit novel. So that was pretty cool. We did that for maybe 2 years and then moved on to a startup, which was an experience that involved building a selling platform on top of Magento where merchants could list their products and then would resell them through Magento. And that was my first kind of play with AWS. We used a service called Elastic Beanstalk, which was certainly interesting. It's like kind of like AWS's Heroku. That was pretty straightforward. That was pretty cool. But unfortunately, the startup didn't live to see success. So moved on to a small company in Melbourne called Fontus. They're like an agency, much like Sitewood. And it was from there, from a couple of guys there, a guy called Lloyd Hazlitt and a guy called Matthew Campbell, that I learnt the trade of sysadmin. Those guys, super, super smart, and now extremely generous with their knowledge. So worked there for a couple of years doing everything, basically. And then I was talking to David one day, because I knew David through Twitter, and he's like, how'd you like to come and work in Germany? And I'm like, Germany seems pretty cool. So got the job off Twitter and moved to Germany and been here ever since. I don't work here in any capacity as a DevOps person. We're much like Winston. We don't really have a dedicated DevOps team. The way it works here is it's like we have a project team. And one person in that project team will manage the side of hosting stuff. So I tend to take all of the hosting type tasks. Yeah, that's basically it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I it's funny. Every time I talk, I can see your face light up with orange because your screen is probably showing my orange background. I love it. Yeah, no, and I thought, you seem to be a big proponent of like agencies having, I mean, you don't call yourself like a DevOps person, but it seems to be a decent chunk of what you do or what you're thinking about, what you're interested in. And I know we've had some chats about that, like that whole strategy around, an agency having kind of an in-house person that sets up all the AWS infrastructure for clients and things like that. And
so the problem that we had, so first I started this journey at Fontus, as I said, who did all of their own hosting. So that wasn't necessarily a choice. It's just kind of like, all right, here it is. Here's the hosting. Learn Linux. Good luck. Once we got to Sitewoods, the problem that we were having, we used a couple of different hosting partners, and the problem that we were having is there was difficulties communicating the exact nature of specific bugs or getting particular things resolved or limitations of the environment. And what we'd find is that we'd start working around the limitations of the hosting provider, or that we'd be doing kind of crazy things to make everything work or get the information that we needed. So about a year ago, probably a year and a half ago, I got licensed to set a client up completely on their own, independent of AWS, because they were concerned about getting locked in. They'd been locked into their previous provider, and the provider was holding them hostage. So he said, yeah, great, for sure. Have your own AWS account. This is always yours. We can't take it away from you. You have rights. Great, good on you. And that turned into quite a success. We built that with the infrastructure as code approach, and we built continuous delivery and continuous integration. And that system is now deploys regularly and is really reliable and really relaxed, as compared to our previous experience where deployments were powered by prayer, basically.
Powered by prayer, right? Yeah, giving clients the control there is cool, because as a client, if you're dependent on a hosting company and things aren't going so well, that could be a pretty nerve-wracking situation to be in. Well, cool. So like, what are some of the like, Winston, tell us a little bit about like your setup. This is where my eyes are going to glaze over a little bit, but I'm sure everybody this is where you guys are going to just start doing your own thing here. But like a little bit about your setup and maybe some things that other, Magento stores might be able to think about as far as their infrastructure goes.
Okay. So first of all, we host entirely in Ireland. That is the closest AWS presence to us. So straight off the bat, we lose about 170, 140 milliseconds.
Wow, that seems like a lot.
Off our site. It's quite a bit. But what we do is, through various levels of caching, we get our site to load sub-second. It's that it gets that feel of instant loading. Okay, so basically our stack looks like we've got a varnish cluster right at the front that you hit. That then caches or sends requests to the backends. The backends is an auto-scalable cluster of PHP 7 and FPM Nginx webheads. We run PHP 7. Alongside that, we've got Aurora. We've always got a writer and we've got a reader in that Aurora cluster. And then we've got separate Redis instances. One instance for sessions alone, another instance for cache. And we're gonna expand on this. That is basically our, let's say the meat on the bone and it's worked out really well. Like, we don't really have a lot of config travel. I suppose it's very different if you're in an agency, because every client has its own demands, its own configs that they need to run. But we are very lucky that we could standardize this. And so, yeah, that's basically it. We have development instances. We separated our site through multiple AWS accounts. That gave us the ability to separate risk and also to give the keys to staging and development to juniors.
Oh, nice.
We've got an automated testing framework that we built on Codeception, and we plug that in with Browser Stack so we can test our site. It's all automated. If we make a PR into a QA branch, that will run some tests for us. Yeah, so that's basically what we have, man.
It's beautiful. So, Andrew, do you get that stack set up for all your clients?
No, and I am infinitely jealous of you, Winston. So, as Winston said, the nature of working in an agency is that no two clients are exactly the same. So it's brought some really interesting challenges. We have been able to standardize some approaches between clients. And I'll give you sort of a release process for one particular client, which is becoming our kind of standard mechanism of doing this in future. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So basically the way it works is we have a ticket that comes in, like a story or whatever, and we say, can you please make this button blue or red or whatever the hell it is? So a developer will check out a story branch, and they'll sort of push that to the origin, and that creates a machine. So we use Bitbucket pipelines, like a CI/CD tool, to create the machine, and we use Ansible, which is a configuration management tool to create the environment. Ansible handles all of the cool bits, like installing PHP and Varnish and Magento and whatever else. And we open source a bunch of the stuff that we work on. So if you're curious, just kind of go and have a look. Then the machine's up and running, and the developer does their work and make sure it works. That gets sent off to QA, where they make sure the developer is not crazy. And then it gets
that fails most of the time.
An uncomfortable amount of the time. And then it gets released into production. So we have one sort of standard pipeline all the way through. We create a machine with one definition, and then we deploy to the production machine with the same definition. So everything's extremely similar. Development was an interesting experience. We actually dropped the full stack from development because it was too complex, and we're finding that the people aren't able to debug things effectively when it's a giant Ansible role or giant Ansible mess. So we run local developments in a mixture of like Docker and just VMs that the developers manage.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it. So
nice.
How do you manage your database seeding and all of that, Andrew?
So basically, it's not as complex as you'd imagine. So when we run database changes, we either, as much as possible, we try and build them such that they're sort of backwards compatible. So when you actually drop the new version of the application in, it doesn't panic and freak out. Where that's not possible, we put the site into a maintenance mode and just migrate the stuff there. Additionally, we try and keep the deployments and the schema changes as small as possible, so we know kind of exactly what's happening, when it's happening, why it's happening, and we can put a nice time box around it to make sure that either nothing breaks or that the downtime that it creates is, I don't know, 30 seconds or 60 seconds or something. So nothing too special, no magic MySQL replication or anything, but practically, we probably see on average about a 15-second downtime with each deploy, and we could fix that, but it's not worth it.
Right. We got a question from Kevin in the chat. Do you all use code deploy / code pipeline?
So
I do not. I'll go first. I do not.
So we use Bitbucket pipelines for everything. Bitbucket's a pretty good system, and their CI/CD tool is super well built, actually, considering it's only 12 months old. So it builds, it stores it in S3, and it deploys an artifact from S3. Does that answer the question, Kevin?
He'll let us know if that didn't answer it. Winston, what about you guys?
Okay, so we also use Bitbucket. It is, like Andrew said, a very nice system to use. We've already got the testing in a pipeline. The code is also in a very simple pipeline that just takes the package and pushes it up to S3. And what we've done is we've written a deployment procedure in a system called Fabric. And what it does is it SSHs into every single machine and does a deploy of that S3. But I mean, we can deploy to any number of servers. It takes us about 9 to 12 seconds. And what we also do that might be a bit strange, but it's just how we do it, is we ship all of our assets with each build. So we ship JavaScript, CSS, all the code, everything.
Yeah, that's how we do it.
Yeah.
Winston, I might ask you as well, because it's sort of looking at the next step for us. We want to try and move to immutable builds. So basically, an immutable build, for context, is where you take a full image of a machine and you install everything on it, and then you deploy the entire machine. So as opposed to deploying just the Magento application, you replace the machine entirely. So my question would be, do you see yourself kind of moving to that model, or do you think that the trade-offs aren't worthwhile?
Okay, so that is a very good question. I know people that are doing this with VMs already. So for example, whenever a deploy happens, you kick a bash script off that creates a whole image of that machine that gets pushed to a launch configuration within Amazon and gets attached to the auto-scaling group, and it will come up with that source code. The issue I have with that is we do multiple quick deploys in a day. So what we can do is we stagger all of our deploys to go out, and we'll let them each go out like literally like 10, 15 minutes after each other. That might cause a little bit of pain if you want to do that. I am not sure if we'll go that way. If we are going to go to Docker containers and stuff like that, probably we could. But then again, would we run our admin host on Docker? Probably not. So we'd only run the front-end cluster on Docker. And already just with that one statement, there's complexity that comes in here. And so it's a very cool thing to think about. I just have to, plan it properly. But I mean, for the moment, I'm much more a fan of my whole build sitting somewhere that gets distributed to servers in lightning quick time than what I am of switching the whole image going with. Yeah.
That makes sense. So the obligatory question, you would move to something like Kube, in which you could handle, because I got all excited when you said Docker. For context, I am a massive Docker fan, but we don't run any production systems on it just yet. No client-facing production systems. So much as I would love to get into it, I have not yet.
Okay.
Would you move to something like that allows you to do that stuff?
So we haven't looked at Kubernetes just yet. I am infinitely jealous the way that you get to play with that. But what I'd have to see is, how does that Kubernetes system handle traffic between it? So, for example, if your ingest controllers maybe has a problem and it starts taking down pods, or maybe you've overlooked the defaults, and the defaults start playing up when you get insanely high traffic. There is value in that. There is value in it. It's a huge part of where the conversation is these days. Are we ready for that level of complexity? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it does introduce quite a bit of magic. We've got colleagues here going through the course at the moment, and what's the metric? The WTFs per minute is pretty high.
Okay, I see.
WTFs per minute. I was like, what's that? We actually got a couple other questions coming in. Isaac asked, since you guys are using Bitbucket, do you use the other Atlassian tools for planning and ticket creation, etc.? We'll start with you, Winston.
Okay, so yes, we do use other Atlassian products. We use Confluence quite a bit. We've got a very huge document store. We've documented all of our infrastructure, when developers join, how to get started, that kind of stuff. We document everything, even features, specifications, all that kind of stuff. And we also use Jira for ticket management.
Nice.
Yeah. And sprint management, I would say.
Nice. Andrew?
Yeah. No, we like basically every other agency in Germany, I'm sure, use Jira to plan and manage our projects, in addition to Bitbucket pipelines, but no other Atlassian tools as far as I can think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, sometimes the questions jump around. You're on one topic and then they jump to another, so we'll just jump around a lot. And then another question from Kevin: do either of you guys have AWS certifications, and do you feel that there's any value to having them in the Magento ecosystem?
Okay, I've got no AWS certifications. I'm busy doing a AWS associate course through acloud.guru. You can pick them up for pretty cheap on Udemy. And that course is actually very nice. You can transfer it to acloud.guru. You've got these awesome videos. I think it's from Ryan. I think the guy's name is Ryan. He is very, very skilled, explains stuff very simple to you. There's a lot of value in having AWS certifications. There's a lot of value in having any certification. So my advice is yes, everything is going to be on the cloud sooner or later. And AWS, according to me, is such a big player there that, and once you understand the principles of AWS, you can apply them very easily to any other cloud system because they basically work around the same.
Right. Awesome. Sorry. Back to that super deep discussion you guys were having before I so rudely interrupted. Or maybe, I mean, I'm curious, like maybe give an overview of like Docker and Kubernetes, some of the different options in that space. Like what are some of the high level differences between those different things?
Right, so I can kind of explain the two different alternatives which we take, one of which is Ansible, and we use EC2 as our kind of deployable unit, and one of which is containers, which is the kind of the alternative. So EC2 is a virtual machine. You just kind of spin it up and sort of apt-get install whatever you need. It's pretty straightforward, and it's nice and easy, and there's heaps of talented developers who are really good at managing it. Containers are kind of like a virtualized VM, but also not really. So a container is something like a tarball that you pull down onto your machine, and then you pretend it's a VM and run stuff inside it. So some sort of custom-made dev package would be another way of looking at, or Debian package. Kubernetes is interesting. Kubernetes sits somewhere between AWS and Docker. It kind of runs all of your infrastructure. So traditionally, where you would think of services like Elasticache or Aurora, you would instead use packages on top of Kubernetes, like the high availability Redis or the MySQL clustering stuff. So it lets you take any cloud provider. We work across currently 4 different cloud providers, and treat them as roughly the same, which is the principal value add for us. You can learn one set of tools and reuse that everywhere the client wants to run their data.
Gotcha. Nice.
Andrew, how do you guys manage like credentials and configuration, versioning within Docker? Is it all Ansible based? Or?
No, so Kubernetes provides this artifact called a config map or a secret. There are 2 different artifacts. One's encrypted at rest. That's basically the only difference. And they're mounted into the container at runtime. So say, for example, you have an Nginx container and you want to have specific configuration for that Nginx container and you don't want to pack it into the container itself. Then you would run the container with reference to this specific config map, and then Kubernetes would mount the file that's in the config map at /etc/nginx/confd or whatever. So Kubernetes provides you with a tool to manage configuration stuff. Just like a key value database.
Nice. Let's see what direction we're going to take this now. Is there, I mean, you guys have talked a little bit about some of the things you're some of the cutting edge stuff you're thinking about looking at and maybe can't right now because of current constraints within your team or within your systems. What are some of the different things you guys are looking at as far as I actually started listening to the AWS podcast, I don't know, a month or so ago. I understand very little of it, but it's just fun to hear them talking about new services that come out. I think the most recent one, they were talking about a chat bot that they built, and they talked about how they used Lex for it and how they handled authentication and just all the different services they plugged in is kind of interesting. But any recent services, do you guys stay on top of all the services that come out and kind of play with them as they're coming out? Winston, you first.
Okay, so we try to. We definitely try to. What we're looking at the moment is, Redshift, for our big data mining, historical reports, all that kind of stuff. We've built up quite a bit of quality data through all of our orders and our customers and our interactions and all that kind of stuff, and we want to start reporting on that. And we're also looking at some other stuff like some AI for product recommendations. How do we handle stuff like abandoned cart? How can we do that automated in an automated way? How can we do that more intelligently? And then something that's caught my eye was that Google AI that can act as a call center agent. That can
Oh my
call a Chinese
gosh.
store, and
That was so terrifying and awesome all at the same time.
that was beautiful. So,
Like the little
I mean,
and ahas that it inserted, it just sounded so natural.
so natural. And I mean, I could just see that fit in completely seamlessly within an e-commerce business. I mean, you're either asking about an order or you're asking about a product, or so there is some exciting stuff that we're looking at.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are you guys looking at for if we could dig into the product recommendation use case a little bit? That sounds pretty interesting. I know you mentioned Redshift. I'm not too familiar, but maybe if you could flesh that out a little bit. What are you guys looking at to build out the product recommendations?
Okay, so basically, currently what we have is AWS Aheadworks, simple recommended products, I believe they call it, automated recommended products, and we really want to do a lot more in that space. There's a lot of research, I think, where these big e-commerce companies are saying how much of their orders comes from personalized recommendations to their customers. And we haven't quite fleshed out the direction we're going to take there, but it's certainly very, very interesting, and it makes complete sense. So there's a big focus for us on optimizing our customer experience on our site. Is it easy for a customer to shop? Does the customer get to the product that he wants to get to? Once that product is in his cart, we've recently launched a reserve cart. So once you've added the product to your cart, that product is reserved for the next 10 minutes in your cart. You've got the stock assigned to you, and you can check out. You can imagine with a flash sale site, people would literally fall over each other, adding this product to cart, and you'd get a lot of like bounces at the checkout. Once this customer is trying to check out, someone has already bought that item. And so we've had a lot of good feedback from that, and it's made our process a lot easier. And there's not such a, not so much risk to literally have this product snatched out of your basket before you can check it out.
Right. I thought Andrew was going to jump in with something there, but so what are the services that you're looking at for the product recommendation stuff? I mean the AWS services.
We are not, we haven't identified a service as yet. It's more about how do we want to build this? How can we build this to, what is the vision that we have? What is the idea that we can implement? How is it going to play nicely with Magento data? Maybe not necessarily coming out of Magento, but coming out of a different data store. How's it going to play along with stock availability before it makes a recommendation? So it's more about a strategy about what we want to build before we go and choose the services that will fit in with that.
Gotcha. Kind of early stage, trying to kind of sketch out how it'll work and everything.
Yeah.
Nice. Andrew, are you keeping an eye on any of the latest services coming out? And
somewhat. The nature of agency is basically we want to build a service offering, a super reliable service offering, and then make it as cheap as possible, and then roll it out to as many people as possible, so we can give merchants the maximum value for cash for their invest. So we don't tend to do a heap of greenfield stuff on behalf of the merchants. However, we do this thing called Improvement Day, which is basically we set aside a day a month and then just kind of greenfield something that's cool. So a bunch of interesting things have come out. We have a section of the company that's dedicated to creating voice experiences. So you're talking earlier about Google Duplex or Google Assistant or things like that. So we're creating interactions with Magento systems and various other services. But beyond that, same old, making things run well, run fast, run cheap.
Gotcha. Nice. Oh my God, that duplex thing was so wild. I still can't wrap my head around that. It's pretty awesome.
It was beautiful, man.
Yeah, it was. Oh my God. It's whether it's those things like those AI things or like also the Boston Dynamics robotic videos that are just like they're so awesome and simultaneously terrifying, you know.
But can you believe we're living in this time, right?
I know. It's
where I think I read something the other day where they want to start mining asteroids in 2020, which is like a year and a half away. And it's crazy. It is a beautiful, crazy time to be alive.
That's going to be Elon Musk, surely, mining asteroids.
Right.
No anyone else crazy enough to do that.
Yeah. just the whole like reinvigoration of like space travel is crazy. I mean, I don't know if it was in the 50s or so when, you know, we're going to go to the moon, we're going to do all these things. And then everything just sort of stopped, you know, until Elon busted on the scene. And it was like, I made a few bucks from PayPal. Let's go nuts.
Let's go burn some money.
A question from Oscar. What is your strategy to deploy in AWS GCP with multi-stage server? What's GCP? Is that Google Cloud?
So GCP is Google Cloud Platform, but I don't know where it is in AWS. Let me Google it. AWS GCP.
I guess he's saying, what's your strategy to deploy with either AWS or GCP with multi-stage server?
We don't have any high availability stuff, so I can't comment.
What's a multi-stage server? Let me start with that.
I would guess, Winston, he's talking about Canary. Do you think that's reasonable?
Yes, maybe like a Docker instance moving from local to development, staging, production, I guess.
Maybe Oscar can clarify if that's not clear enough for us to answer.
Andrew, I've got a question for you, man.
Yeah, man.
I mean, obviously you guys are a big agency and you must have a lot of clients, but how do you approach Black Friday as an agency? Because obviously you must get lots of client requests. We want to test our site. We want to make sure we're ready. We want to upload prices. That's a big one. At 12 o'clock, we want to change 20,000 product prices. We want to invalidate caches. We want to have indexes to run. And these prices must be live by 12. How do you guys handle that?
Just to provide some cultural context, it's not as big a deal in Germany just yet. We're only just starting to see the edges of the Black Friday craze start to creep at the edges. We essentially slept through it this year. No one complained. No one did anything. The last thing that you probably should know for context is SiteWords has traditionally been very business to business rather than business to customer, which means we do like lots of high value transactions and need to integrate with the ERPs and things, but high traffic loads are only a problem in a couple of cases. Yeah.
Okay.
And for that stuff, we just ignore it. If it falls over, we declare an incident and freak out.
Actually, Winston, we got to get you to talk Black Friday stuff. How is that pretty wild out there where you guys are, or is Black Friday not as big?
Okay, so Black Friday by us is very big. It is by far the biggest day that we have of the year, there's this whole week leading up to Black Friday where we take advantage of the whole week. So it's not only Black Friday, it's Monday to Friday, and also the next Monday is called Cyber Monday. I don't know if you guys have heard about it.
Oh yeah.
So by us, it's very big, and so we had to. So probably the biggest thing for us at the moment is, of course, scale and handling all of the traffic and all that kind of stuff. But there's some other nuances that goes with it. So, for example, we'll have a lot of stock that we'd have to sell on that day. You know, we just have a lot of stock that we have to sell. So you can imagine an incident. It really eats at your bottom line on that day. It really bites you. And then the other thing is, like, we would have at a minimum 20,000 product prices that would have to change. And so we haven't yet built a facility to schedule those prices and execute them at a time. So with a flip of a switch, this price is now, let's say, $100, and it's now $80. But what we did do is we built a price importer that will import prices and clear caches and set index values and all that kind of stuff. And I think when last we ran it, Black Friday, we did 20,000 products in about, was it 10, 15 minutes? And all of those prices were live on the site throughout the catalog listing, on the product view pages, on the cart pages, as well as the checkout. So we've done a fair amount of work in that area. And Black Friday for us is always a big thing. Like we scale our infrastructure, we scale the database, because Redis is an in-memory cache store. We'll terminate Redis and we'll spin up a bigger instance. We'll change our config settings. We'll have a bigger spec web server. We'll have a bigger spec Varnish cache server, and we'll run that for those busy days, and we'll turn it down. So we'll tear that infrastructure down maybe over a weekend, save a bit of cost there, and then bring it up again on the Sunday night for the next week. It's pretty interesting. And then we're all at the office at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we've got a pretty nice culture. So we'll have a whole room just for us, and there'll be like motivational pictures against the wall. We'll have like bowls of chocolates and sweets and biltong and coffee and all this kind of stuff. So the company does take care of us. And then what we'll do is, like, mostly everyone will sit with popcorn in front of analytics and New Relic
on a big screen.
Just watch the site fly, because it, by us, it's so big that even the payment gateways fall over. And 3D Secure, you'll have problems with 3D Secure. So people will start to use different payment methods to get the orders through. Very interesting.
So, Winston, I would be curious, what architectural changes have you made to Magento itself to make that possible? Like, I know historically we ran into orders reserving stock. We would end up with lock tables and a few other things. So I'd be curious to see what changes you've made there.
Okay, so this Magento has been coming along for, I would say, 4 years now, where we've just continually optimized Magento. We've turned off login. We've disabled features. We have rewritten SQL queries. We have rewritten mechanisms to, for example, we don't use any catalog price rules. So we've disabled all of those indexes on the checkout. We've got mechanisms of how we move orders from the database into the orders grid. We've just done a lot, and we continuously do a lot. So if you look at our New Relic, we've got an average PHP response time of 125 milliseconds. And so we've built our own load testing framework as well, where we generate load on this site, and we make sure that, why is the select so heavy? Let's go and call that. Let's target this one transaction. see if we can make it a bit lighter. So we've done a lot of work. There's, in fact, so much I can't even remember everything. Just to stay up, and thankfully we have stayed up, and we also have another sale that we call a sale.
So, Winston, I might just get you to repeat that if possible.
We're losing him.
It's the internet, turns out.
So
it's funny that right as he was talking about staying online and
what
not
we
going
do
down.
Oh, Winston, are you back?
Are you back? Yes. I think you're back.
Am I back?
You're back.
Oh,
you're back.
You sure? Are you sure?
I think
Sure.
go back like 30 seconds or so.
Okay, so we have just optimized so much out of Magento. You know, we have changed the way that we run indexes through our site. We have changed the way that we take orders into the sales flat orders grid. We have killed, for example, catalog price rules. We don't use that. We've killed that off. We have looked at specific SQL queries and changed that around. And we also have this sale in preparation for Black Friday. We have a sale called a secret sale. And on this day, we sell very high-end fashion at insanely low prices. So we'll sell Louis Vuitton leather boots for like $1. And on this day, we get so much traffic, and we use that as a measuring stick of how ready we are for Black Friday.
So, just out of curiosity, how do I get on that secret list? Just for my wife, you know?
You just have to visit runwysell.co.za and just be a customer.
Do you ship to Germany? I'm sure I could work that out.
We don't ship to Germany, but I'm sure I can bring you a pair of boots. I'll just have to wear them.
What's the
so I can get through customs, you know?
Winston, you mentioned you built your own load testing framework. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay, so we had a problem generating the right kind of load on our site. So for example, we've got React and Redux that we use through our site. We use Ajax calls quite a bit. And we haven't found a load testing framework that can interpret JavaScript and kick off Ajax calls as a normal browser would. So what we did was we built a codeception acceptance test, and I provision 4 Amazon X1 32X larges. And those are insanely big machines. I think they got like 500 gigs of memory, 128 CPUs each. And I use this as my load generating servers. And then we wrote this codeception journey, and we use a Google Chrome headless browser with a Chrome driver interface in between. And at the moment, we're using Python concurrency, but I need to generate more concurrency there. So we're looking at swapping it out to Go. And this is how we load test our site and generate all that load.
Nice. Sounds legit. And basically the reason why you said other tools don't work, the Ajax requests off of your React front end or whatever, they don't send the right headers and stuff like that so that the Ajax requests go through?
Well, so a browser will interpret JavaScript. And if you open up our homepage, for example, we could have 4 Ajax calls that get kicked off through that interpretation, through JavaScript executing itself.
Right.
And if you're using stuff like Gatling or JMeter, I don't know of a way to kick off those JavaScripts automatically. So what it forces us to do is load the homepage, then kick off these 4 Ajax calls, then add a product to cart, then kick off another Ajax call. And, it's just a very difficult way of working, and it doesn't feel like a natural user browsing. So with Chrome headless, we plug in a development analytics key into our site, and I can see traffic as I would see normal customer visitation. I would see 8,500 concurrents in Google Analytics, surfing pages as a normal customer would. We've added the ability to choose a random event with random products, add between 1 to 3 or 4 products to the cart. Once those products in the cart, go to the checkout. If there's any problems with those products, remove them, go add more, and then complete this checkout journey. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Winston, I might just ask you a question if that's possible. The 150 milliseconds from here to Ireland made me think, are you looking at progressive web apps at all, like sticking a service worker between you and the user?
Yes, that is a very good question. We've got a rudimentary service worker in our site. Mm-hmm. We looked at PWAs very early on when they just attracted mainstream. The one problem that I had was that a PWA, when we looked at it, would serve stale cache, and then as a service worker, fetch new fresh cache. Mm-hmm. And we have this philosophy where we need to show absolute freshness on our site at all times. And so that caching strategy didn't fit in with it. Mm-hmm. So what we did was, our site is fully responsive, and it's built 2 native apps, iOS and Android. And it's basically just a native shell with 3 tabs at the bottom. And we embed this site of ours as a web view within that application. That's given us the ability to send push notifications, and Android has become so clever that you could, for example, our Contact Us page is a tab. You click on our number, it will bring up your dialer. You click call, it will call our call center. We've got that in place, but we are looking at PWAs and making this experience a bit better and a bit seamless and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Nice. We did get a clarification from Oscar on that question about multi-stage servers. He said by multi-stage, he meant multiple web application server.
Highly available servers? That sounds like you, Winston.
Okay. So multiple web application servers, yes. So basically, we are very conscious of cloud cost. And so at different stages of the day, we'll have different number of servers, certainly web front ends in our cluster. But we typically, in the morning, 7 o'clock, we'll have 1 web server. At 7 o'clock, we'll scale up to about 8. That scaling operation will take about 1 minute and 30 seconds. That is including bringing up the AMI, deploying our application on it with 2 health checks. And so roughly about 1 minute and 30 seconds after that scaling operation got kicked off, you'd start to see traffic in the access log. And then what we do is that is sufficient capacity to ride our load. And we then, as that load starts to come down a little bit, another automated call will get kicked off. And we'd use the scaling policy of AWS to scale us down again to about 3 servers. And then at 10 o'clock at night, we go in for the night shift and we kill off 2 again. And we'll have another server running right through the night. So we call that scheduled scaling. But all the while, we've got dynamic auto-scaling in place. So if the CPU of that cluster starts to rise, we'll just add 2 more hosts into that cluster, and they will get scaled down automatically as the load scales up and down.
So do you mind if I ask, is that between like 2 and 10 servers, or is there sort of an infinite range that you'll scale up to?
I've scaled up to 100 servers before. Having 100 servers, in your cluster was not something that I would recommend, because we even did deploys having 100 servers, and we had to deploy to 10 servers at a time because our current deployment framework uses SSH, and it would just the latency would just grow. All that kind of stuff. But our limit in Amazon is 150. But typically, our approach was, let's rather have lots of small servers than just a few big ones. And I still like that approach to this day. So we'll have like a couple of small, tiny T2, I believe it's T2 larges, or T2 larges in our cluster. And we'll just have a couple of them, and we'll just swap them out as it is. And also another thing that we did, like our termination policy, is terminate the oldest first. So typically, the maximum amount of uptime that a server can have in my cluster, a front-end server at least, is about 12 hours. And then that whole server is teared down, and we get new servers in its place.
And the other question I would have for you, just from a hosting point of view, is how do you deal with media? The obligatory hosting question.
Yes, so media was quite an interesting one. I mean, media is always a pain. And what we wanted to do was we were looking at EFS. The problem that we have is we've got this media shared throughout multiple AWS accounts, development, staging, production. And I believe that EFS wasn't able to do that at that stage. It might be able to do it now, but what we did was we installed a tiny NFS server with the media on an EBS block device with snapshots daily, mounted onto this NFS, and a share is exported into our different accounts, which would then mount the media onto each of these web hosts as they come up. And it's worked out pretty well. And what we did was we stuck CloudFront in front of it as an image CDN. So typically, each image would only get fetched once. Then it's in the CDN, and from there on, it's just CDN traffic.
Nice.
What like in terms of like work-life balance, like you are with a pretty mature organization that's, you've put AWS through its paces. You talk a little bit about being up at 4 a.m., some nights and things like that. What does your work day look like, overall? And like, how is the work-life balance overall with such massive spikes in traffic?
Okay, so I'm a father. I've got 2 little children. I've got Valerie, my daughter. She's 4 years old, and my son Luke, he is 6. And I've got my wife, and so my philosophy is that I don't want to ask my developers to work outside of work hours. They're allowed to if they feel inspired, if they want to. Continuously ask them to work outside of office hours. Something is wrong with the way that I plan my features, that I plan my whole business. So basically, there is that portion. I believe that you should put family first. You must have a balance. And so basically, my day looks like I wake up at 7 in the morning. I make sure that my cluster is scaled. I will events opening up. At 9 a.m., I take the motorbike to town, and I work there until 5:30 in the evenings, and then I'll come to my house. And at 6 o'clock every night, we sit down as a family together and we eat and all that kind of stuff, and then all that. But as a company, we have yoga sessions for both the girls and the guys separately. We're putting in a gym in our office. I've got a skipping rope in my bag. I'm still learning how to skip. I look like, basically, imagine Barney skipping. That's me.
So you're not quite up to the like Rocky Balboa levels?
I'm getting there. But we take good care with this work-life balance, and then also as a team. Once a month, I take my whole team, and we call it Foo Fridays, and it's the last Friday before payday when you're at your most broke. I take the company credit card and my entire team, and we go to a remote location. We've been at the Bay Hotel in Campus Bay, and then lunch and drinks for that day is on runway sale. The only requirement that I have is that you work on something that will benefit yourself and in some way benefit runway sale. So we try to keep it fun, and we're all human,
That sounds awesome. Are you guys doing visas for people from the United States out of just out of curiosity?
Come over. We've had Tim Groom from the Netherlands. He's visited me before. We've got a really nice vibe,
That's awesome. Is there kind of like a Magento community out there? Are there meetups and stuff like that? What city are you in, by the way? I always forget.
I'm in Cape Town. I'm in Cape Town. There is a Magento group, but it's not as active, and I suppose our landscape is so different. So typically all the Magento developers are either at agencies or working for merchants such as ourselves. And it's so competitive. The e-commerce landscape in South Africa is so competitive that we keep our cards close to our chest. I mean, I share a lot of our stuff, but I wouldn't say there's a big Magento community here with meetups every month and all that kind of stuff. Unfortunately.
Right. Nice, man. I know what I want to ask. So GDPR has landed. I may have violated certain policies with the email that was sent out today. Has that affected you guys at all, Winston, or is most of your customer base all South African, so it's not too much of an issue?
Look, it's certainly a big deal for us. We take our customer data pretty seriously, and we value our customers more than anything. So we are not in the business of spamming. We are not in the business of distributing your data. We see that as it's what we do, and so we have made precautions to keep your data safe. We've made precautions to make it as easy and seamless for you to have us not contact you anymore. But our site is always there, and we've got quite a nice community. Once people get to know Runway Sale, they love it. They love the prices that we offer. They love the product that we have, and so they stay close to us.
Right. And your customer base is pretty much all in South Africa, or?
It is all in South Africa. We only ship within South African borders, so we don't ship overseas. And we've actually geared our site in such a way that you have to check out with a South African address and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, you gotta be careful with the Europeans, man. You gotta be careful when you're doing business out that way. No, I'm just kidding, Andrew. We were talking a little bit about some of the stuff you guys have done around GDPR.
Yeah, we've been very careful. No, so the GDPR for us was fairly straightforward. It introduces some new requirements, particularly around explicit and easy to understand consent, which was the thing that you saw the newsletters pop out for if somebody had just kind of acquired your newsletter, they now needed to ask you explicitly whether or not you wanted to be part of them. So we had to do a few things around like contact forms and various other bits and pieces with that. Additionally, the right to delete, and we need to make sure that we have deletion criteria for all customer data. We keep invoices for whatever the period is, 10 years, I think. GDPR is interesting because you can make a request to delete your data. So say, for example, I am a customer and I turn around to Winston and I say, I don't like you anymore, please delete me. If I've actually made an order of him in the past, then he can't delete me, at least in the case of Germany. So you need to make sure that you can build that logic.
That was one of the things I was curious about. How that.
So the way it's written, the law of the relevant country, you're not allowed to keep data except where other law requires you to explicitly.
Right.
So employment contracts, I think, are the other one that's you need to keep those. There's a few bits and pieces. So it was a bit of a non-event for us. We just kind of said, yeah, look, this is fine.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I saw something on Twitter over the weekend that like a bunch of politicians have requested articles that weren't flattering about them to be deleted from Google. 30,000 deletion requests or something like that. So that's
okay. I didn't know that you're allowed to do that.
The other one that's a super interesting case is who is records. If you query who is records now for EU, there will be nothing, and they're not allowed to show who is data. So
that's wild.
Yeah, so it's like all things a double-edged sword. I think there are provisions in the GDPR for the public interest, but I'm certainly not up to date on what they are. So yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how everything shakes out. How do laws and obviously, Winston, I know you're not a lawyer and everything like that, but how do laws in South Africa compare to the stuff in the GDPR? Are there a lot of similarities or?
Well, South Africa has started to make headway with that. We're very much an evolving market, and so we, for example, would get a lot of calls at any time of the day from anyone that has ever found your details. So, for example, I don't even check my SMSs anymore because I get like 100 a day.
Oh, damn.
Maybe not that much. I get like 20, 30 SMSs a day, and it could range anything from funeral cover to you've been accepted for a loan to life cover to get less insurance to pay your TV license.
That's worse than the US, man. I don't get that much SMS spam.
Everything. So my mother always says to me, like, you never read my SMSs. And I'm like, oh, sorry, but we have to talk. We talk, and then I get to behind the story because those SMSs just get lost. So for the most part, I check WhatsApps and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, the law is heading in the right direction, but it's certainly very loose at the moment.
Right.
It's like the wild, wild west.
Right. It sounds like it. Well, cool, man. Anything else we haven't touched on yet that that we want to get to before we wrap this bad boy up?
Obligatorily, we're hiring. Please come and see you, I suppose.
Awesome.
Yes.
Winston, anything else?
Kalen, nothing from my side, man. I just want to say, Andrew, you're an encyclopedia of talent. I always enjoy our conversations. You know a great deal about hosting, Kubernetes, all that kind of stuff. Kalen, thank you for having me on here, man. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. It's a lot of fun. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you have any other questions that weren't answered, you can shoot me an email or something like that, and I'll chase them down, get some answers for them. Where can people find you guys online on the internet? Winston, you have sort of a Twitter account-ish, but I don't know if you use it other than just posting your music and stuff like that. Where would you?
I can be reached at Developer Beats, or you can just pretty much find me in Mage Chat. I guess that's a good place to start. But I don't really tweet about tech. I'll just tweet good sets that I enjoy listening to while I'm writing code and all that kind of stuff.
Nice. And Andrew, what's your Twitter handle these days?
Andrew Howden.com, because my name is Andrew Howden, and you can go to .com.
Ah, tricky. Very nice. Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you very soon. And that's it.